control the vertigo.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery suspense anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic. Today we are talking about Night Gallery Season 2, Episode 21. This episode had two stories, and the first of which is one of the strongest stories in the whole of the Night Gallery, I'd say. It was very effective. So the first story is called Sins of the Father, directed by Jenna Schwartz, who has done lots of Night Gallery episodes, and written by Halstead Wells. Not a name that's familiar to me, but yeah, someone different, I guess. And this episode, both stories, aired on February the 23rd, 1972. Now, the first episode, Sins of the Fathers, is set in like medieval Wales, and let's just get the elephant out of the room. The accents applied here are quite atrocious. They sound more like they're from the northeast of England than Wales. They're not even close to Wales. Welsh, I mean. And it's kind of jarring. But if you can get over that, it's an extremely strong episode. It stars an older actress, Geraldine Page. Richard Thomas, who went on to play John Boy in The Whartons. And that's a fairly bland role. Well, you know. Feels bland. Here, he's giving it his all. Apparently he's a stage actor, and he was applying that here, and it kind of come across as melodramatic, but I think it worked. Totally works. It also stars Barbara Steele, her of the very famous in Italian horror. She's very, very striking features, very high cheekbones, appeared in a lot of Italian horror, and in fact many elements of this episode feel like an Italian horror film from the 60s. The look and feel of it. It's quite amazing, and that might be why Barbara Steele was drafted in. Also in the cast, was kind of weird, is Alan Napier, the man who played Alfred in the 60s Batman. But I don't think we see him. I think we might just see him dead. But I don't recall him. Another actor I wanted to mention is Michael Dunn, who is an actor of short stature, a dwarf, who is actually very effective, good actor. He's kind of very cool in this. I recognised him. He was also in an episode of Star Trek called Plato's Stepchildren, where he was like the servant to the gods, as it were. It's a episode infamous for the first interracial kiss. And I say infamous because if you read about it, it was kind of the studio execs interfered at every stage and made it really awkward. However, I think it's a really interesting episode. I think in his autobiography about Star Trek Memories. Shatner talks about how they really couldn't do what they wanted to, and he doesn't think much of the episode in general. But I think it's a really interesting one because it's kind of an analysis of victimhood. Really a deep one, you know, where the victim feels like they're to blame for what's happening. And Michael Dunn carries a lot of that, and I think he's really good. And he's quite good in this too. Anyway, diverting from Star Trek, that's not a good sign, but this is a really good, solid story. Essentially, it's called The Sins of the Fathers, and it's about a medieval sort of belief of a sin eater, which is someone who consumes the sins of the newly dead. And it turns out this Barbara Steele's husband has died, and he's still fresh. They haven't buried him yet, but they need a sinner to come and eat away his sins so he can go to heaven. And they can't find anywhere because the whole countryside is ravaged by plague and everyone's frightened to leave their homes. So they go to one sin eater, but he is ill himself. And the mother says to her son, "You're going to have to go do it." She goes, I'm not going to take an older man's sins. I can't do it. His name's Ian in this. And the mother sort of says, no, what you got to do is this. You got to insist that you are alone when you eat the food, which is also eating the sins, but do not eat one crumb of it. Hide it away, and make all the signs that you have, taken on the sins. Now this involves evoking words. Now when he gets back, there's all sorts of little peculiarities in this. It's a really good script. Like for example, the Michael Dunn who goes out looking for the sin eater, when he gets there, he says, the mother says, "Well, can he use your horse?" And he goes, "A sin eater on my horse." He goes, even if we're doing you a service, you still despise us. It's all that kind of stuff. So she makes him promise that the sin eater can ride the horse there and ride the horse back, and he doesn't. You can tell he finds it distasteful, thinking about what it'll taint his horse. But anyway, he agrees to it. When they get there, the wife is shocked how young. He said, "This weak boy cannot be a sin eater," and he says, "It's all I could find, and they're burying him real soon." So she agrees that he can be the sinner. Then he says, "I need to do it alone," and they all say, "No, you must have witnesses. That's part of the ritual." And he says, "No, I won't do it then." And in the end, the wife agrees to that. So everyone leaves him in the room, and as he's doing the prayer, the calling, "I'm taking in these sins," he's screaming and shouting, but hiding food inside his clothes. But wailing. I mean, Richard Thomas really goes to town in this one. It's quite impressive, actually. And although it's overblown, it works. It's affecting. It's affecting. And in the end, they think he's done his service. He goes back home and he gets all the food out. And his mother says, "You didn't eat anything." He goes, "No, I did not eat one crumb." And she says, "Well, you may eat it now." But she covers it up. She goes, "Well, why can't I eat it here?" And he goes, "No, you must eat it here." And it turns out his father has died. So he has to then become the sin eater for his own father, who was a sin eater, so therefore has masses and masses of sins on his shoulders. He's taken sins from all over the place. And he says, "But mother, I cannot take all these sins, at my young age." And she says, "You will have a son. He can take them from you." And it's like perpetuating what's going on. Really cool. Really, really like this one. I thought it was well acted, well written, well directed. Jenna was really conjuring up the spirit of Italian horror movies, which are always, from the 60s, are very atmospheric and stylish. They in turn were sort of influenced by early Hammer, so they've got that kind of feel, but with their own peculiar Italian sensibility. And this was really tapping into that. Really strong piece. I thought it was excellent. Though it was written by Alistair Wells, it was based on a short story by Christiana Brand of the same name, The Sins of the Fathers. Really, really solid. The only real letdown was the terrible, terrible accents used. If they'd have just said it's in England rather than Wales, that would have been fine, because it was kind of English. It wasn't great, but it was an English accent, not a Welsh accent, so it kind of made much more sense if they said that. It's simple change as well, so there you go. So that was the first segment, the longer segment of the two, and what filled its time well. I think this is one of the best stories in all the episodes we've watched so far. Still really hold the pilot in very, very high regards, but this one was a very solid, serious story. The second story is called "You Can't Get Help Like That Anymore." Now, this was directed by Jeff Corey, an old hand at Night Gallery, written by Rod Serling. And as Rod Serling's concerned. Now, it stars, probably the most famous is Cloris Leachman, Broderick Crawford. Gross Reach was reasonably well known this time. I think this was after The Last Picture House, where she smashed that one out apart as a supporting actress. I don't know if she won an Oscar, but she was really good. Broderick Crawford, who I think is more a Western guy, he's an older actor. And Lana Wood's in it. Lana Wood's interesting. She's Natalie Wood's sister. She is probably most famous for being Plenty O'Toole in Diamonds Are Forever, James Bond's Diamonds Are Forever. She's a very beautiful woman. And we also have Seven Darden, who isn't that... I recognised him, but he's a bit niche. He was in Conquest for the Planet of the Apes as like a evil guy, head of security guy. And then in Battle for the Planet of the Apes as like the head of the mutants. Quite a good presence. And he was in this as the Doctor. All right, the story is these people are selling basically androids to do housework and stuff like that. And it's... it kind of... what happens is a young couple have come in to sort of inspect, think about getting one to do the ironing and the washing and, housework and all this kind of stuff. And they demonstrate how lifelike it is. Now, his secretary comes in and she looks a bit plasticky, but we do find out she's an android. Now, this is interesting because when I watched this, I thought, that looks like a man. And I looked into it. Yes, indeed, it was a man. A man who did a famous drag act in San Francisco in the 60s, doing Marilyn Monroe. In fact, Marilyn Monroe came to see it. That's how. But it's really interesting in this. She's not presented that way. He's just a secretary. So it's kind of refreshing to see, sort of cross-gender thing going on without any comment or having an attention to it. Not part of the plot. It's just there. Quite progressive, really. And I was kind of impressed by that. So anyway, what happens is this model comes back destroyed, and the man in charge of building the robots is really angry because he says this wasn't a breakdown. This was willfully damaged. These are brutal people. And like the sales guy, the head of it says, "Look, you just give it." Anyway, they do provide another robot, and it's got a built-in survival mechanism. And at first, it goes to the home, and the husband's a bit lechy, said, "Oh, it's all you do, housework, it's all this." The wife really hates her for some reason, kicks her down on the floor, spills stuff on the floor, makes her pick it up and then throws bottles, steps on her hand deliberately. But the worm turns. The robot has got this, and it's Lana Wood. She's doing quite a good role. She's quite good. Now, apparently they had quite a lot of trouble with Cloris Leachman in this because she's used to stage work and not being confined to hitting her marks on TV. And things like that. So she was constantly doing something different each shot, and the cameraman was driving the cameraman crazy because the focus and stuff like that. But Lana Wood was fine because Lana Wood apparently grew up on TV and knew what she needed to do. So she hit her mark, she delivered her lines. She had to underplay it to be robotic, and that was deliberate. She does a good job, and the makeup gives them a slight plasticky air as well. And it turns out there's other stuff going on at the end, which I won't spoil, but there's a bigger thing going on with these robots. In Rod Serling style. We're used to his twists, end of the Planet of the Apes. He wrote Planet of the Apes. At the end of that, that's a hell of a twist. Not a bad story, but the real standout for this one is Sins of the Fathers. Really, really solid. And we're quite close to the end of season 2 now. There's only one more episode, and that'll be season 2 done. There's one more season after that where it goes to a shorter form. The episodes tend to be half an hour instead of an hour. But there's a fair number of them, so we're going to be talking about Night Gallery a little while longer. Yeah, but this Sins of the Fathers very solid, very solid. I may actually recap when I get to the end of the season 2, which I felt, and discuss possibly what my top 5, not in any particular order, but maybe my top 5 episodes of season 2. I may do that. I'll see, but that'll be for next time. Okay, yeah, very, very cool. Very enjoyed this one quite a lot. Anyway, I'm going to wind up there. But before I go, may I ask, is anybody out there?
I'm not. We now return control of your television set to you. Until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to